Good morning. I'm the Rev Ron. My pronouns are he, him, and we are All Souls Unitarian Universalist Church. Rooted in a community of love, the mission of All Souls Unitarian Universalist Church is to cultivate compassion, foster spiritual connection, and enact transformative justice to heal ourselves and the world. So these three clauses are linked, of course. Cultivating compassion, fostering spiritual connection, and enacting transformative justice are all necessary to heal ourselves and the world. It's a worthy mission for a cohort such as us. And it is now more evident than ever that the world needs healing. And to coin a phrase, we are the world. That's not to say that we can project ourselves onto the world like some psychic colonists. Rather, it's to say that for the world to heal, we need to heal. We must demonstrate that it is possible. We must invite others into the project in a way that suits them. And we must hold on to hope. And there is no greater hope than our children. So today, 9 children of All Souls will come forward to receive your blessing and your promise. And so as we light our chalice this morning, I'd invite you to center on the hope our children represent. That's the sound of hope. And invite you to center on that. And our subsequent responsibility for that hope to flourish, for us to find the wherewithal to reconnect with our own purpose and recommit to healing ourselves, and thus healing the world that needs our compassion, connection, and justice so dearly in this and every hour.
Have you heard that sound before here in Colorado Springs? Maybe you've heard it when you've walked by Nancy Lewis Park, just a little bit north of here. It is a migration, and they were here just a couple weeks ago. The sounds of migrating birds or migrating geese from the Russian tundra. I am going to share a story from a people across the world. Sounds of thousands of migrating geese from the Russian tundra. Northern winds that blow across the lands. The aurora borealis that changes the deep night into dazzling colors. So, nature and story entwined for the Estonian culture. Who guides these geese each year? Hear their sound, enter into their story. Once upon a time, the daughter of Yuku, guardian of the winds, took care of all the birds of this world. It was beautiful Lindu's task to guide the birds on their long migration in both spring and fall. Lindu was lovely and tender, gentle and kind, and the birds not only depended upon her, they loved her. So delightful was Lindu that others also loved her and many wished to marry her. One day, out of the sky, a chariot pulled by 5 white horses appeared, and Polestar was there. He carried 10 exquisite gifts for Lindu. When he stepped out of the chariot, he said to the maiden, "Marry me." Lindu laughed and shook her head. Polestar, day in and day out, season after season, year after year, you stay in one place. I cannot marry someone who doesn't move around. Saddened by Lindu's refusal, Polestar pulled the reins, turned his horses, and rode away. But right behind Polestar, came a glittering silver chariot pulled by 10 silver horses. This was Moon, carrying 20 magnificent gifts. "Lindu, marry me," he said. Again, Lindu said no. Moon, day in and day out, season after season, year after year, you walk just one path. I cannot marry someone who doesn't move around. Moon was saddened by her refusal, but just after he was gone, a shining gold chariot pulled by 20 golden horses appeared before Lindu. Out stepped Sun, holding 30 spectacular gifts. Sun beamed at Lindu. "Marry me." Once more, Lindu shook her head. Sun, day in and day out, season after season, year after year, you too walk a single path, and that I will not do. Sun hung his head low and departed. Once more, Lindu was alone, and the world was dark as midnight approached. Then suddenly, from the north, there appeared a strange glow in the sky. Light flickered and flashed, and Lindu saw 1,000 silver horses pulling a gleaming diamond coach. She could not resist the sight, and so she moved toward it. There stood Northern Lights, holding thousands of jewels, gold and silver, pearls and sapphires and diamonds. He held out his gifts toward the dazzled Lindu and said, "Marry me." This time, Lindu was the one who beamed. "Northern Lights, you travel wherever you wish, appearing everywhere, and when you do, you flash and you gleam and you shimmer. You are magnificent. I will marry you." Northern Lights told Lindu he would travel home to the far north while his bride prepared for a grand wedding. And so he departed. And Lindu, eyes sparkling, skin glowing, sang and danced the days away as she selected her bridal gown, her veil, the flowers for her wedding day. Moon, Sun, and Polestar were envious and sad, but the birds were frantic. As the days passed and Lindu stood in her wedding gown and veil awaiting her future husband, they saw her light and joy begin to fade. Months passed, and when spring migration came, Lindu did not lead the birds. She simply stood still in her gown, waiting. Many birds were lost that spring. The seasons continued to pass, and the Northern Lights did not return. Lindu was in despair. "Where has my beloved gone?" she cried to the sky. She began to sob, and though the birds surrounded her and fluttered their wings against her cheek to offer comfort, Lindu remained sad-hearted. The months passed, and again with autumn migration, the birds were lost. At long last, Yuko, Lindu's father, decided he must do something to help his grieving daughter. He called upon his winds, north and south, east and west, and he called upon all the birds too. "Carry my sweet daughter to the sky. If her beloved will not come to her, she must go to him." The winds and hundreds of thousands of birds flew to Lindu, and careful not to damage her delicate white gown and trailing veil, they lifted her and carried her up to the sky. When Northern Lights saw his beloved in the sky, he remembered his love, and he quickly shot across the sky toward her. Beautiful Lindu, he called, my love. When Lindu saw him, her sadness dropped away. Let us marry now, and you will travel to the north with me, Northern Lights said. At first, Lindu lit up with joy, but then she looked around and saw the lost birds, and she remembered her duty to them. After all, they had come to her aid in her time of need. She could not abandon them. Then she remembered her duty to take care of herself as well, to be responsible in this world. Her heart fluttered and turned. She looked at her beloved Northern Lights. I cannot travel to the far north, she said, but I will marry you here and now. You will visit me on occasion, but I shall stay here where I must. Lindu and Northern Lights married, and Lindu was once more filled with light. Wearing her gown and veil and facing north toward her husband's home, she lay down across the sky, making a path for the birds. And there she stays, turned toward her beautiful husband, waving to him as he flashes near her. And so they remain in the sky, heart to heart. You might see Lindu's veil in the dark night sky that guides the geese. It is the path we call the Milky Way. And when you hear the sound of migrating geese, look up and marvel at their migrating formation. Think of Lindu and how she cares for and guides them on their seasonal path.
As we prepare for the offering, I'd like to draw your attention to these yellow cards that hopefully are in the back of the pews in front of you. We're rolling out something new today, and we're counting on you for feedback about this process. If you find yourself in a situation that you could use some care from one of our pastoral ministries, please fill out one of these cards and place it in the offering plate as it passes. And a representative of the lay pastoral ministry team will collect them, and you'll be contacted soon. And for today, the lay pastoral ministry team representative is Dan Mormon, who is back in this corner. As to the offering itself, in keeping with our mission, we are pleased to be able to partner with organizations whose values dovetail with our own. And this month, we are sharing the collection plate with The Place. The Place provides a safe 20-bed shelter for homeless youth between the ages of 15 and 20 years. The shelter operates 24/7 as the only licensed youth shelter in our city. They provide meals, clothing, health care, counseling, supportive relationships, and assistance with long-term housing placements. And our sponsor in this effort is the Economic Equity Team. If you wish to make an online donation, be sure to select Share the Plate from the drop-down menu. If you're texting, indicate the dollar amount plus share. Example, $50, share. If your collection plate donation is a pledge payment, just write pledge on the donation envelope or on the memo line of your check, and we'll apply that donation toward your pledge instead of the share. The offering will now be gratefully received, and thank you for your generosity.
So it's also Question Box Sunday, and appropriately, a number of our younger folks contributed, as did some of you. So thanks to all. The first question is to me: did you see Santa come down your chimney on Christmas? And honestly, the answer to that is no, I did not see Santa come down my chimney on Christmas because, A, Santa is way more sneaky than that. Wouldn't let me see him. And B, we also have a gas fireplace that I think is probably too, I don't know. But Santa, of course, is magic, right? So Santa could appear wherever Santa wants to, especially and mostly in the hearts of everybody in this room. Which probably means you should have gotten more presents, but that's another. Okay, how does All Souls choose what social justice issues are addressed? Well, this year, so we've got 4 or 5 pillars. 6 pillars. We've got 6 pillars under our social justice, and they are economic equity, anti-racism, help me out, unhousedness, that's economic equity. Come on. LGBTQ, immigration, thank you, and climate. Okay, I don't know if that's 6 or not, but we've got 6 pillars. And they are chosen at the beginning of this year. We gathered everybody who was interested in social justice, and we went through an exercise where we, sort of prioritized by weight of vote the categories that we wanted to pay attention to. We paired that up with donation partners. And of course, each of those needs leadership, and if no leader emerged, they kind of withered on the vine and a new one emerged. So that's the process by which we chose the social justice issues we address. It was essentially a democratic, voting is another one. It was a democratic process based on the people who showed up to that meeting. What is the most fun part of my work as minister? I think you all may have just seen it. That was fun for me. And this is fun for me. I like to preach. Actually, more than preaching even, I like writing. My Thursday is my writing day. And that's a day where I ignore everything except the words and the music that I write with. And it's a really wonderful spiritual exploration for me that I bring to you on Sundays, and hopefully to me it's like going out into the wilderness and getting something of value and bringing it back and sharing it with you in the hopes that it has meaning for you. It always has meaning for me, so I hope that translates on Sundays. That's my favorite part of the job. There's a lot of really good parts of this job, though, and it's an honor and privilege to have it. What do I think came before the Big Bang? Santa Claus. I don't know. If it weren't mixed company, I have a phrase that describes that question that alludes to something that we shouldn't allude to. But that's a big question. That's a big question that I don't know that we have an answer. And the part about that that's interesting is that now we have to live with that uncertainty. But that's part of life, too. You have to be able to live with a little bit of uncertainty. And that is a fundamental, another one of my very favorite questions that's very much like that is, why is there something instead of nothing? It's almost the same question, a little bit different. But we'll actually get to that in a little bit. But that's another one. Like, we can't be certain about why there's something instead of nothing, or what was before the Big Bang. And you know what? If we ever find out scientifically what matter or non-matter existed, or thought wave existed before the Big Bang, the next question is going to be, what's before that? So this question is always unfolding. It's almost an infinite question, and we just have to live with that uncertainty. Why are bone stories called bone stories? Well, thank you, Kathleen, for sharing a bone story earlier today. We decided to call them bone stories Because these are myths. These are myths and legends and lore that have existed in human cultures around the world, sometimes staying in place and being generated from a specific context, sometimes traveling across the globe, right? But all of these stories live in our bones. So our goal as the Bone Story Collective is to identify stories that live in our bones, that when you hear them, that when you hear, oh, the goose created the Milky Way to help guide the geese to the north, that part of you goes, oh yeah, I know that. A lot of these stories are stories that we tell because we already, deep in our bones, know them. And the other part of the telling of these stories that we hope to do is connect this mythic story to whatever I'm saying on Sunday, attach it to a bird, and help use that all as a mnemonic device, which means a method of being able to remember what happened on Sunday. So now, the geese are flying right now. You will hear the honking. Thank you. You will hear the honking as you go about your day, and maybe that will cause you to remember something about the Milky Way, something about some moral of that story, or something about our children here and your promise to them and yourself, to heal yourself and the world. Like, all that gets wrapped in, and that's what these stories have done throughout time, is they've trucked information, morals, and memory tools into a story. So that's why we call them bone stories, because we hold them in our bones. And that comes from the mythologist Martin Shaw. I ripped it off from him. Can you address some aspect of the congregational work required to understand and implement the eighth principle? As it is painful to acknowledge that we are so flawed, what do you think are the best ways to identify implicit bias in ourselves? What methods do you think are best used to overcome? Oh, wait, that was the same question. Okay, so methods. Yeah. My own experience, I'll speak more about this in particular in an upcoming sermon in a couple of weeks, where we talk about anti-racism as a spiritual practice. The condensed version of that sermon will be, but still come because there will be music and each other. The condensed version will be that anti-racism work is among the most spiritual practices that I have ever engaged with. That path has been at times quite painful, but at times very joyful, and certainly liberating. Interesting, liberation sometimes does, like in Plato's cave, cause some distress on the way. And the reason why is because I get to uncover my own biases as we walk through that walk, and then the world is revealed to me as other than it was and more accurate. Right? We were all raised by families and culture and history to see things in a certain way that when you investigate anti-racism and invest yourself in anti-racism training, begins to fall away a little bit. And a more accurate version, a more connected version, a more progressive version, a more healing version of the world begins to emerge and call you to more work. So you learn about yourself, you learn about the world and your relationships, and it's a deeply spiritual practice. So, and as the more you learn, the more you know, the more you're able to reflect and discover your own biases. I've definitely had multiple occasions of discovering a view that I held that I didn't know I had in me, that anti-racism learning sort of exposed. And so I strongly encourage all of you to take that invitation to take the programming offered by our anti-racism team. It's really revelatory. Okay, since the election, oh boy. I have been struggling with waves of immense anger about the state of our world. How can we use our anger as fuel? And how can we speak the truth in our outrage without creating further division and hatred? Yeah, that's the trick, right? Outrage is easy to feel and sometimes productive. And sometimes kind of creates the same problem that we're in already. And I honestly don't have a very succinct answer for this one, except, as I've said before, I think we need to be very rooted in something that is not contingent on your news feed. So you've got to have one foot deeply grounded, while the other foot is, like a skateboard. You skateboard, that's how it is, right? Am I right? Skateboard through life, okay. Yes, and outrage only goes so far, and I think ultimately exhausts everybody, including you. So I'm not saying don't feel outrage, because there are certainly things to be outraged about, but I don't think that is going to be a place to necessarily ground until the very, very, very last resort, in which case, maybe. But hopefully, our job is to make sure that the last resort is never seen. So you've all taken the right instinct is to be here. The right instinct is to be with one another, to ground in something eternal, and then to get to work. Yeah, outrage or otherwise, there's work to do. Okay, last question, right on time. Why does everything exist? So, my favorite response to this question, it's not mine. I didn't come up with this, but I love it. And I'm paraphrasing immensely here. But there's one of my very favorite thinkers is a fellow named Daniel Schmachtenberger. And he was, I don't know what the question was. He could have been a preacher because you ask him one thing and then he could talk for 30 minutes about a great number of things. So what he said was that in the very, very beginning, perhaps right after the Big Bang, or maybe before it, in the primordial ooze, cosmically speaking, primordial ooze, it took one thing being resonant with another thing coming together to produce yet another thing, a third thing, and repeat, repeat, repeat. So the fundamental action there is attraction and creation. And a non-scientific way to put that is love. So, it may be a little bit trite for a minister to say, but the reason that everything exists is love. And as we reflected on Christmas Eve, you are love. You are a continuation of that very first attraction. You are the cosmic dream given legs and fingers and the ability to make more love. So, please rise, embody your spirit. Thank you for those questions. And you can also afterwards ask those questions of each other and find out what you all think about those questions. Santa Claus, before the Big Bang. Go ahead.